My friends and I found something disturbing while hiking in Utah. Part 2. Written by the Globetrotter. Hello again, YouTube. I'd like to imagine that I would have made the decision to return to the cave on my own, but I would be lying if I said that your comments hadn't pushed me in that direction. I called Dakota at around 7 o'clock last night. She picked up almost immediately.
"Hey, what's up, Alex?"
She asked, her voice slightly electronic. "I've been thinking," I said, trailing off. Did I really want to do this?
"Yeah?"
She pushed anticipation in her voice. I sighed. "I think we should go back to the cave," I said. My words were met with silence. "I know that Charlie's alive. He has to be," I told her. There was more silence through the cell phone.
"I was thinking the same thing,"
Dakota finally said. Her voice was quiet. We talked for a little while. We decided together that we would go tonight. There was no use in putting this off any longer. I was outside of her house at around 8 o'clock. We had both called off work for the next day and were ready to leave. The front door of her house was opened within the first minute that I had pulled up onto the driveway. She wore the same pink baseball cap from the week before, her blonde ponytail sticking through the back. I smiled as she got into my car. "Hey, A," she said, shutting the door behind her. She was trying to make this meeting feel normal, but it was anything but. "Hey," I said, gripping the steering wheel. She looked at my hands. "Are you feeling okay, Alex?" I nodded. "Don't worry about me, Dakota. I'm just a little nervous, that's all," I said, giving her a polite smile and glancing at her hat. "I like that hat," I said, confusing even myself. She hadn't expected the comment either. "Oh, yeah, thanks. I don't really know why I put it on, to be honest. The sun isn't going to be up for long anyways," she said and laughed nervously. We didn't mention it, but we both felt it. This was the most awkward conversation that had been between the two of us since high school. She adjusted the hat on her head. "So, is Isaac coming with us?" I hadn't even thought of our friend, as bad as that sounds. "Oh, I haven't talked to him," I said. She nodded. "Well, let's call him now. We can use all the help we can get." I pulled out my cell phone, scrolling through the contact list. Isaac's name was near the bottom. I clicked on his name and waited.
"Hey."
Isaac finally picked up. He sounded tired. I put the phone on speaker mode and said, "Hey man, what are you doing right now?"
"I'm with Josh,"
he said. I could hear Josh was trying to make a joke in response in the background. Dakota eyed me as I spoke. Isaac, we're going back," I said, suddenly nervous. Isaac remained silent for a few moments.
"No, you're not, Alex."
I chewed my lip, looking at Dakota. "We have to, Isaac. We just left Charlie there, man. We owe him this." Isaac groaned through the phone. It sounded like he was walking now.
"Look, Alex, I don't know what you saw in that cave, but we have to be realistic here. I don't think he's going to be there anymore."
I frowned, staring into Dakota's blue eyes. "It sounds like you don't even care, Isaac," I said.
"Alex,"
he said, flustered.
You know that isn't true. I'm just being realistic. What are we going to do if a bear got Charlie, or wolves? I mean, I'll even humor your own theory for a minute. Say there is a giant deer/spider whatever creature in that cave. What then? We'd be better off getting into a fistfight with the bear."
I opened my mouth to speak, but I knew he was right. Isaac continued.
"Look, I say we just go to the police. This is what they do."
Dakota spoke. "Why would they even believe us?" Isaac hesitated. He hadn't realized that Dakota was with me.
Well, just don't mention Alex's story. Tell them that it was a bear. They can deal with whatever it ends up being.
We waited a week, Isaac, Dakota said. A whole week, and we didn't mention this to anyone. What explanation would the police have for us holding that information? He trailed off. This is on us, she said, looking back to me. I can't leave him there. We have to try. And we're going to do it whether you come with us or not. Isaac groaned.
You guys are thinking too quickly.
I've sat around thinking for long enough, Dakota said. I'm going. I could hear Isaac swear under his breath. He'd moved the phone from his face.
Fine.
He finally spoke, shocking me.
Just start driving. The hospital is in the other direction. I'll meet you two there. Don't do anything stupid until I get there, okay? Please?
Dakota smiled, relieved. Of course, Isaac. Our friend hung up. Dakota sighed, her head hitting the headrest behind her. I stared at her, fear suddenly filling me. Did I want her doing this? Could I even stop her? She turned her head to look at me, finding that I was already looking at her. Alex. I nodded. She chewed on her lip. Are we doing the right thing here? She asked. I sighed, looking out the window. I really don't know, Dakota. She nodded, rubbing her face. We can't leave him there. I know, I said, placing my hand on her arm. She seemed to relax. I'm with you. Whatever you want to do, that's what we'll do, I told her. She smiled slightly, a smile that I had never seen from her before. Thank you, Alex, she said. We drove all night. We did stop a few times. Dakota seemed to want to pull over more than she had last week. Maybe she was stalling. If she was, I thank her for that. I pulled into the parking lot that sat in front of the trail at around 6 in the morning. Only one other vehicle was there, a familiar black truck. I stepped out of my car, Dakota following as I approached Isaac's truck. Our friend stepped out of his vehicle. You two, what took you so long? I thought you weren't coming after all, Isaac said. I looked at Dakota and said, sorry, we had to stop a few times. Isaac nodded and moved towards the back of his truck. Well, we might as well start moving, he said. I looked to Dakota briefly before following him. What's the plan here? Isaac reached into his truck bed, moving aside a tarp and pulling out a shotgun. I blinked, taken aback. Isaac, I said. Isaac didn't hesitate. What, Alex? What do you want from me? Something took Charlie, so I'm going to bring something to protect myself, he said and looked towards Dakota. To protect us. I nodded slowly, glancing to Dakota. She was staring at the weapon. I guess that makes sense to me, I said, watching as Isaac pulled a flashlight from the back of his truck. You can hold the flashlight, he said, tossing it to me. Now, you tell me what your plan is. This was your idea, not mine. I looked at Dakota. Was I making a mistake? Well, let's just start heading back to the cave. The sun should be up soon, I said and shrugged. Not that it will matter once we get inside the cave. Isaac grunted. All right, but what if this thing finds us? What then? I thought for a moment. Well, the tunnel that leads to this thing was way too small for it to fit through. I mean, the rest of the cave isn't big enough to hold it. I think it can only stay in that cavern. Isaac nodded and then asked, And what about these people then? I felt a chill run down my spine. Yeah, I'm not too sure about them. Isaac sighed. Well, it sounds like we'll be safe from the creature so long as we stay out of its chamber, he said slowly. He sounded like he really wanted to believe my words, but that he was having trouble to do so. I'm just hoping that his followers, whatever they are, don't try to take us there. Dakota sighed loudly, startling me. We should start moving. I want to get out of here as soon as we can. Isaac nodded. I can't help but agree, he said. We walked along the trail in silence. The remainder of the moonlight did a good job of lighting up most of the landscape for us. Before long, the sun would rise. We arrived at the canyon much faster than I would have liked to. Isaac stepped up to the edge of the cliff, looking down to the bottom. I see a stain from Josh's blood. We're in the right place. I nodded, looking to Dakota. She appeared to be shaking. Are you doing okay? I asked. She looked to me, somehow surprised that I'd asked, and said, I'm fine. You can stay up here if you want, I said, silently hoping that she would take up my offer. Isaac and I can handle this, I told her. I'm fine, she snapped before instantly softening. I'm okay, Alex. You're not going down there without me. I nodded, looking to Isaac, who was now staring at us. You guys ready to go? He said. I exhaled softly, gathering my nerves. I'm as ready as I'll ever be right now, I told him and headed towards the cliff. Isaac grunted and began to climb down the canyon wall. I stepped up behind him, placing my foot on one of the ledges that protruded from the rock wall. I glanced at Dakota before descending, slower than I had last time. My fingers gripped the wall as I continued to move down into the canyon. I was about 10 feet from the ground now. I looked down to the bottom, watching as Isaac brushed dirt from his shorts. My eyes moved down the canyon, landing on the cave's entrance. A figure stood at the opening, their arms hanging loosely at their sides. I was far away from the cave, but I was sure that I wasn't just seeing things. What? I said, startled. My foot slipped from the ledge, surprising me even further. I gripped the wall harder, but it was no use. My fingers ripped away from the wall as I fell backwards into the canyon. I couldn't have fallen for much longer than a second or two. My back slammed against the floor of the canyon, oxygen immediately expelling from my lungs. I gasped, desperate for air, just as my back exploded in pain. Isaac was by my side in less than a second. Alex, he said. I could hear him, but my vision had started to fade slightly. Was I passing out? Dakota knelt by my side, but I couldn't hear her. I was completely disorientated. Dakota's words finally entered my ears. Alex, are you okay? She asked, fear in her eyes. Alex, please. I forced myself to nod. Relief seemed to crash over my friends. Are you sure? She asked, her hand on my arm. I pushed myself to a sitting position. My back hurt, but at least I wasn't paralyzed. I'm okay, I said, my voice completely shaky. Oh, thank God, she said, resting her forehead against my shoulder. I thought that you had just killed yourself. I felt comforted with her by my side. My eyes moved back to the end of the canyon. The entrance of the cave was empty now. I think I saw someone down there, I said, pointing towards the cave. Down by the cave? Isaac asked, gripping his shotgun harder. I think so, I said, not wanting to move away from Dakota. Looks like they've been waiting for us then, he said, his voice finally showing some signs of unease. That's just great. I pushed myself slowly to my feet. The flashlight had rolled away from me once it hit the ground. It was now lying beside a small rock. There was a small crack in the protective glass above the bulb. but it could still be turned on, thankfully. It was much better than our phones could ever be. We moved towards the cave slowly, a new feeling of horror passing over me. What if Isaac was right? Had they been waiting for us to return? I shined the flashlight into the cave as we approached. There was no one immediately inside. This didn't calm me down, however. "Let's head inside," I said, rubbing my back. It hurt, but I would survive. "You're the boss," Isaac said, stepping inside. I'm glad that he had a gun. It's more than Charlie had, that's for sure. We walked deeper into the cave. I kept Dakota behind me as Isaac led us down the tunnel. I made it a point to keep the light in front of him at all times. I wanted to be sure that he could see what he was shooting at, if it came to that. We eventually stepped into the first cavern. The flashlight's beam bounced off the back wall, the illustration causing nausea to tear through my gut. The drawing of the creature was eerily accurate, at least for how simple it was. "That's the thing," I said, pointing at the mural. Isaac cursed and slowly walked up to the wall. "What is this place?" he said. I looked at Dakota, whose own eyes were locked onto the wall. "What is that thing?" she asked. Isaac stepped to the side. "There's more drawings over here," he said, looking back over his shoulder at me. I frowned, shining a light onto the adjacent wall. He was right. There was a grouping of smaller drawings that lined the wall. I stepped up to my friend, holding up the light. The first drawing depicted one of the men from the main mural. In his simplified hands, he held a small creature. Its head resembled that of the monster that took Charlie. The next picture depicted a man strapped to a rock of some kind. The man from the first drawing returned in the second. The small creature was now visibly larger than before. "What is this, some kind of story?" Isaac asked, touching the drawings. I shined the light further down the wall. The next drawing showed the creature much larger than before. About a dozen men stood beside the drawing of a wall. All of them were holding what appeared to be chisels. This final drawing led to the large mural on the back wall. "This is bizarre," I said, looking once more at Dakota. Her eyes hadn't moved away from the main drawing. I was worried about her. "What does it want?" Isaac pondered, letting his shotgun hang from his right hand. A terrifying howl ripped through the cave. I nearly dropped the flashlight in shock. Dakota cried out in terror behind me. I spun, shining the flashlight onto her. The beam of light illuminated her back. Past her, in the mouth of the second tunnel, stood a naked man. He stared at us, completely motionless. I hadn't noticed, but I'd started moving towards Dakota. I stepped up beside her, putting my arm over her chest as Isaac stepped past me, the shotgun firmly in his hands. "Who are you?" he asked, shifting anxiously on his feet. The man remained unmoving. He stared at us with empty eyes. His left hand was tightened into a fist. "Who are you?" Isaac asked again, slower than before. The man did not respond once again. I felt Dakota's arm wrap around my own. Isaac took a step forward, raising his shotgun. "I will shoot you. Tell me what you want." The man raised his arm, unclasping his hand. I moved quickly, stepping in front of Dakota. I shut my eyes, fearing the worst. I let my eyes open slowly as the sound of bare feet slapping against the floor echoed through the cave. Isaac stood there, staring at the man as he ran back down the tunnel. "What was that all about?" I asked. Isaac didn't reply. I turned to Dakota, who was still gripping my arm. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly, letting go of me. A loud clang echoed through the cavern. I spun, startled. Isaac was now walking towards the tunnel, his shotgun lying on the floor. "Isaac, what are you doing?" I yelled and stepped towards him. My heart started to race. I knew what was going on. Isaac didn't answer. He stepped into the tunnel and began to walk towards the creature's home. Dakota sprinted past me. I reached out to stop her, but I was too slow. I followed her as she stepped up behind Isaac, placing her hand hard on his shoulder. "Isaac, where are you going?" she pleaded. Isaac stopped moving, looking at Dakota without speaking. "What are you doing?" she asked again, shaking him lightly. Isaac blinked. Dakota turned to me, her hair flipping over her shoulder. Fear was plastered across her face. "Alex, what is this?" Isaac had an odd look in his eyes. Within the span of a second, his hand shot up, grabbing at Dakota. His hand wrapped around the first thing that it could find. Isaac yanked on Dakota's hair, causing her to gasp and yelp in pain. "Isaac, what the?" I was moving quickly now. "Isaac, stop!" I screamed. My friend didn't stop. He had started to walk faster, in fact, dragging Dakota behind him. She had started to swing her arms at him, crying out in pain. I acted quickly. I sprinted towards Isaac, leaping directly into his side. His grip on Dakota didn't loosen as he fell forwards towards the ground. The three of us crashed into the cave floor. Dakota cried out in pain, but I ignored her for now. Isaac was trying to push me off him. His arm came up and connected with the side of my head. His knee jammed into my stomach. I lifted my hand and brought it down hard onto Isaac's face. My fist connected with his cheek, the back of his head smacking against the cave floor. Dakota gasped as I pushed my friend onto the floor, slapping his face. "Wake up, Isaac! Wake up! Stop!" My friend looked up at me, confused. What just happened? I looked to Dakota, relief flowing through me. Isaac suddenly groaned in pain, rubbing the back of his head. "Did you just punch me?" He growled. "You just dragged me into the tunnel, Isaac," Dakota said, kneeling beside him. "Do you not remember that?" "I what?" he asked, his hands reaching for his cheek. "That man, what was he holding in his hand?" I asked, helping my friend to stand. He seemed to have forgotten that the man even existed. I don't remember. There's just like a gap in my memory. I don't know how to explain it." I returned to the cavern, returning with Isaac's shotgun. Whatever that man did with his hand is connected to the creature somehow. The same thing happened to Charlie, I told them. Isaac groaned, realizing that all of this was actually happening. Dakota was looking down the tunnel. "I think we should keep going. The exit is down that way," she said. I nodded. She's right. Isaac didn't argue. The three of us moved down the tunnel. I felt the walls getting closer together as we walked through the cave. The morning sunlight could be seen through the opening at the end of the tunnel. Before long, we'd reached the tunnel that led to the creature's cave. "This is the tunnel up ahead," I said, shining the flashlight in front of us. The light began to seep into the hole in the wall. "This one right there," Isaac said, peeking into the tunnel with his shotgun at the ready. He hummed lightly to himself. It's empty." I nodded and looked at Dakota. The side of her body was covered in dirt. "I'm going to go inside," I said. Dakota froze. "You're what?" Isaac shook his head. "No, man, you saw what happened to me. To Charlie. You can't." "Nothing will happen if I don't look at whatever that man was holding," I said. "The tunnel leads to a cliff within the cavern. Everything else is happening down below. They won't even see me." Yeah, but it's obvious that they're expecting us, Dakota said, stepping towards me. Well, I said, just stammering. Then it's probably better that only one of us goes anyway, just in case. Alex, Isaac started. I'll be fine, I said, looking back at Dakota. I'm the only one who's been inside anyways. I'll be quick. Isaac groaned, rubbing his forehead. Don't go all the way in, he finally said. Just look inside. See if you can get Charlie, and if anything happens, anything, call out to me and I'll be there. I said nervously. Just protect her, okay? Dakota blinked, confused as I stared at her. Isaac nodded. We'll be okay, man. Just promise me. I'll be fine, I said again, stepping into the tunnel. I could hear my friends shifting behind me. Please be careful, Dakota said, whispering for some reason. I didn't respond. I felt the walls begin to squeeze my chest as I pushed my way towards the cave. I shut my flashlight off when I reached the tunnel's final turn. I couldn't risk being seen. My knee rubbed against the wall as I shimmied through the tunnel. I could hear the ambient sounds of a crowd up ahead. I was getting close. This time, though, I was ready. I exited the tunnel carefully, crouching as I entered the cave. The creature was the first thing that I saw. It stood near the back of the massive cavern, looking down at the crowd of people. They sat there, kneeling on their knees. Their backs were straight as they stared up at the monster. The crowd was chanting something lightly under their breath. I swore that I could make out Charlie's face in the mass of bodies, but I wasn't completely sure from up on the ledge. I looked back to the creature, fear building inside of me the longer that I looked at it. Its hollow eye sockets were pointed towards the floor, but I still felt as if it was staring directly at me. I took the time to count its legs. There were 6 of them, 3 protruding from either side of its body. They really did appear to be like a spider's. A large sac of some kind was growing near where the groin should be, behind the creature. I suddenly realized that there was a ramp-like slope leading up and around the wall of the cavern. Just as I'd seen it, I heard a soft grunt from behind me. I turned, gasping loudly as I made eye contact with one of the naked men. He stood at the top of the slope, staring at me with wide eyes. 2 other men stood right behind him, one with a clenched fist. I looked back to the creature, stumbling towards the tunnel as the men began to move. It was looking at me now. "Run!" I cried through the tunnel, a haunting howl entering the tunnel behind me. I could practically feel the men following me as I pushed hard through the tunnel. "Alex!" Dakota cried out. I turned the corner, finding 2 dark figures standing at the end of the tunnel. I stumbled out of the tunnel, nearly crashing into Dakota. Isaac looked down the hole in the wall, his eyes becoming wider as he saw the men approaching us. I pushed Dakota towards the exit as Isaac stood in front of the tunnel. "Stay away," he said, his voice trailing off. A gunshot echoed around the tunnel as I moved with Dakota. Dakota gasped as Isaac fired. A loud cry of pain escaped from the tunnel. The creature howled in return from deep in the cave. Isaac eventually stepped out into the morning light behind us, leaning on his knees. He swore and caught his breath. "Did you find Charlie?" Dakota asked. I think so," I said, breathing heavily. It was so hard to tell." "What do we do now?" Isaac said, looking back at the tunnel. The other men were nowhere to be seen. "We can't go back now," Dakota said, shaking her head slowly. "There's no way that we'll be able to get to Charlie after that." "Right. We need to come back when they aren't expecting us," I said. "I shook you out of that trance, Isaac." Maybe we can still help Charlie." "I had only just been put into it, Alex," Isaac said, rubbing his face. "We don't know for sure that will work with Charlie. Plus, who knows whether or not these people will ever not know that we're coming." I sighed. He was probably right. "I'm not leaving Charlie, Isaac." "Neither am I," Dakota spoke up. Another howl exploded from the cave. It was a pained cry. We had killed one of its followers. It couldn't be very happy. Isaac shook his head, looking away. He finally spoke after a short time. "I hope you know that I want to help him, Alex. I'd die in order to save him. You just have to see that this doesn't seem very possible." I nodded. "I know, but what choice do we have?" Isaac sighed. "Tonight, then," he said. "We'll come back tonight with more materials. We'll kill that thing, and we'll get Charlie back. Okay?" I couldn't help but feel that the plan was far-fetched, but I did want it to be possible. So I said, "I'm in." "So am I," Dakota said. "We have to stick together in this." "Dakota," I started. "I can take care of myself, Alex," she said. "You can't stop me." I couldn't help but smile. "All right, tonight then," I said. We rented a motel room about 20 minutes away from the trail. There were only 2 beds. Isaac decided to take a nap out in the car. We needed to rest before tonight. Dakota is snoring softly on the other side of the room. I don't want her to go with us tonight, but there's almost nothing that I could do to stop her. I don't blame her, though. I love these guys. Isaac, Charlie, Josh, especially Dakota. I've put a lot of thought into this. I would rather die trying to save Charlie than live knowing that I left him to suffer like this. I know the others feel the same way. I need to get some sleep. I have a long night ahead of me. If I don't update you all tomorrow, well, I'm sure you can figure out what happened. If you would have told me a week ago that Josh would be the one to get the best part of this deal, then I would have never believed you.